So this is my favorite part. Well, I always say that this is my favorite part of this show. I don't know, but I like hearing about your journey too. But my book is called Tips, Tales, and Truths for Teens. It's a guide on how to navigate the college admission process, which also is found in Dream College Academy, as you know. But our listeners like to hear very practical and sort of behind the scenes, like, because it's so mysterious, this process, right? The college admission process is mysterious to someone who's never been through it, for sure. But offer us your best truth or tip and your favorite tale. So you can take it in let's start with a tip or a truth that you have, and then we'll share your tale. So go ahead.
Definitely. If I were to give any type of tip or advice in general, it's take yourself out of your comfort zone. I'm not sure if you were going to mention this a little bit later, but moving from a predominantly Hispanic high school at Godinez and then working my way to Chapman, which was at the time a predominantly Caucasian university, that was just a culture shock in of its own. I had no clue that it would have been that much of a difference. At first, like during my first semester, as I kind of alluded to earlier, it was kind of a rough transition because I was in unfamiliar territory. I didn't know if this was going to be the remainder of my experience, but in part that was because I was being very reserved because of how unfamiliar it felt. My main goal was to go to class, get my work done, and go home. I was not trying to join any clubs. I was not trying to apply myself into the community. And especially as a commuter student, that is something that you can fall into very quickly. And I'm really happy that I was able to get myself out of that little funk, because had I not, I probably wouldn't be here talking with Dr. Colon about my experience and be in admissions as a whole. So definitely having the capacity to challenge yourself in new environments. So if you have an idea already of what types of schools that you want to go to, look at all your options that you've selected out. Which one is the most unfamiliar spot or most unfamiliar community to you? And maybe explore it a little bit more, because you really never know if you'll find your niche there. So that's something that I would leave for students.
So good. And yes, I was mentioning before we went live, listeners, he was sharing a little bit about his story and growing up in Santa Ana. So for some of you out there, there's a book I would recommend, and it's called A Darker Shade of Crimson. If you are living in an area where, as a minority, you're the majority in that area, but you're heading off to college, parents, it's a good idea just to, you want to prepare your child for what that's going to look like and feel like, and make sure they have all the support they need. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. So good. Yeah. All right, so describe a tale of a student that sticks in your brain for whatever reason, maybe an applicant that you read, maybe someone you met, and share with our listeners what makes them stand out, right? Because this is the question. This is like the $1 million question. What makes an applicant or a student stand out? So give us the tale, and then share why it sticks.
Definitely. So I won't name the student specifically. We'll call this student Matt. Matt was an applicant from the Bay Area. So that's one of my territories that I work with, specifically starting in Oakland and working my way eastward. And he was a very interesting student to read. He had applied, I believe, for one of our engineering programs, and he comes from a very unique background. He is on the autism spectrum disorder. He's on the spectrum for autism disorder, specifically has Asperger's syndrome. Came from a broken home. His mom is a survivor of domestic violence. But something that he reiterated so many times throughout his application was his passion working with kids. And working with families coming from similar backgrounds that he was from. He even volunteered at a crisis center that serves as a care center for victims of domestic violence. So that's something that he didn't necessarily allow himself to become the victim of, but to be kind of that support system for other individuals who are going through the same thing as he. And for someone on the spectrum to have that such of a high level of what's the word I'm looking for? Just that social aspect itself and how much he's been growing that is just amazing, and just makes me wonder what that journey has been like for him so far, and starting from a young age and learning those social cues and now to where they are right now. And I just really resonated with his story because I have family members who are also on the spectrum as well. So hearing that and seeing how he is currently, while also thinking about my cousins and nephews to see where they could possibly end up as well. It just gives me a lot of hope, but also at the same time, his involvement and wanting to work with kids and wanting to inspire the future generations just gives me hope for this next generation coming after me and subsequent generations after that. And I think something to take out of it is it's not so much that this student is coming from special circumstances, it's more so what that student did with the circumstances they were given. They have this strong level of resilience. They have this strong level of confidence, care, kindness. They were genuinely being themselves on the application. I think something that students are under the assumption of with universities is that they need to fit this particular mold. Like they look at the average GPA and they feel like they need to fit there. They look at some of the more popular involvements at that school. It's like, okay, I need to do this in high school so I can make myself more marketable. It's not necessarily making yourself more marketable. It's how genuine, how you feel, your genuine feeling on our campus and in our community. That's what matters more to us than all these different types of involvements. And I think I mentioned it earlier in the responses that I submitted. It's there's a difference between a student who's maybe taken leadership for all 4 years of their high school experience, but when it comes to the application, they don't talk about it at all. It almost makes it seem like that's something that they just did as a resume builder and weren't passionate about the work. Whereas this individual student that I'm talking about, this is something that they've done even before they were in high school. They mention parts of it throughout their application. They talk about why this is so important to them. And it really makes me want to admit that student so much more because I want to see that passion at Chapman's campus. I want to see that level of kindness and care within our community because I know they will be a supporter of anyone in the Chapman community. Whereas the one person who is a leader all throughout but doesn't talk about it or it doesn't resonate with their own personal story, I'm probably not going to have as much confidence in that student. So just how that all comes together.
Oh my goodness. Okay. You guys, if you didn't catch all of that, push rewind and make sure you just like listen to that. And there were lots of little golden nuggets, and it was not only a tale, but lots of truths and tips woven in there. And so if I can just sort of recap, basically, I love what you said. It's not about the circumstances that he had, you know, that he was on the spectrum or what. That's not why you advocated for him. It's not what your circumstances are, but what you do with those circumstances is essentially what you said. And when I was in college admissions at Vassar, someone who was mentoring me used to say, at the end of the day, we ask ourselves when we read an application, given their resources, this applicant's resources, what did they do with them? So given your resources, given your circumstances, given your high school, your zip code, whatever, your background, what did you do with that? And shining through your passion. It's not what you do, but why you do it. So if you're resume building out there, if you parents, if you have kids that you're just encouraging them to list build or resume build just for the sake of that, stop and ask them why they do something and let them allow them to choose the things that they find most passionate and want to do rather than being forced to do. So awesome. Okay, we have one more question before we wrap up. And just listeners, I hope you can hear, and those of you who are watching, you can see why I wanted to interview Carlos, but share with our audience, why do you do what you do? What gets you up every morning?
There's really a lot of reasons. I mean, first things first is just my hope in the world and the optimism that I have just for society in general. That's why I get up every single day and do my work. But I think something that's a little bit more applicable to my job itself is the stories I will read. It's like reading a new book in just a matter of 12 pages, 13 pages on an application, and then obviously with everything else like letters of recs. But there are not very many positions, jobs out there that allow you to really look into the story of someone that you've never met. And I think that's something very unique about admission counseling, but also all the other responsibilities that come with it. Not only are you reading applications, but you're also being possibly a mentor to a student. There have been cases in the past where I've worked with a student who's navigating this entire thing by themselves, whether they're first gen or not. Parents are not involved or the guardian isn't involved, and it's just them. And they look to you as an admission counselor for that help, for that guidance of what they need to do. And that's something that I've always wanted to do. I think halfway through my college career, I realized maybe software engineering isn't the best place for me to be. And I started looking inward at some of the jobs that I had as a student, like as a tour guide and then as an orientation coordinator. And the common thing amongst both of those positions was the interactions that I was having with people and being able to make connections with people that I've never met before. Yet we're finding all these similarities between each other and just having those casual conversations. And I think that's something that continues to motivate me to get up, turn on my computer every single day and tune into my emails, tune into applications when we are reading, but then also offering that time to speak with families and to speak with students if they are requesting that. And I think that's something I want to continue doing for the rest of my life, whether that's in admission or whether it's in a different type of industry or department, whether it be at Chapman or somewhere else. That's something that I want to continue doing for the rest of my life, and it's being that support system and being helpful, because I know me as a teenager, I could have used that extra boost at some points. Even though I had a wonderful support system in high school, I definitely know that there were times where I wish I would have been a lot more upfront with my admission counselors at different universities and colleges. Whereas me and myself, I will look for the students that I know will not reach out, and I will reach out to them myself to let them know, like, hey, you may not think that you have that resource in us, but I just want you to know, if you have any questions or if you have any concerns, just know that they are valid and you can ask me at any point. And I'd be happy to help you through that. And there have been students who've responded to those types of emails, and they're appreciative of those things because they didn't know that they could ask questions. They didn't know that they were able to reach out to someone who works at the school without them thinking that they're going to get in trouble for doing that. I know that was a fear I had if I reached out to my admission counselor, that I would get in trouble, like, oh, maybe this is like a conflict of interest. But in fact, we are here to help. This is our job.
Okay, this is a golden nugget because you don't know what you don't know. And what you just said is really, it goes back a little bit to being first generation, or parents, if you have, even if you went to college, it's been years, I mean, since you went, so sometimes you don't know, and now you have your firstborn or your only child who's applying. So yes, it's completely fine and encouraged to call the office or to send an email and to just have your questions answered. That's what the Carloses of the world want to do. They want to help you. So it's just lovely to hear you share what a human process this is. It's if we were all just throwing data into a database, we wouldn't read applications and we just spit out a uniform list of who was admitted and who was not. But it's a really human process. So thank you for being such a good ambassador for Chapman. So hold tight with us. I'm going to just do our wrap up, and then we'll wave and say goodbye to our audience. But oh my word, this was so good, you guys. I told you you were in for a treat. So here's what you heard today. You heard some tips and some tales and Carlos's own journey. But if I can sort of summarize, this is what I took away. Here is the real truth. The real truth is these 4 words: nudge, name, new, and know. Nudge. Someone is probably nudging you to think bigger and to go beyond yourself and to stretch. And for Carlos, it was his English teacher. But think about who in your life is nudging you to think about college and beyond. Name. Find colleges that know your name, that say names of people when they walk by, how a school is when you visit or when you learn or when you go online in webinars. How they treat you is going to be an indicator of what it's like to be a student there. New. I love that Carlos said, take risks, get outside your comfort zone, and also new, ask questions. Just think about something new in your life. What can you do that's new in your life to take risks and be courageous? And finally, know your book. I love that Carlos talked about reading an application as reading a book about someone new. And that is so true. It's usually 6 to 12 minutes that someone will read your application, but think of your life that you're saying and sharing with the other person who's on the other end. They're getting to know you, and it's like reading a new book each time, okay? So that, my friends, is the truth that I took away from today. Wow, thank you, Carlos, for being with us today. You can wave a second. I'm going to say our goodbyes as the audience can see you here too. I want to thank our listeners and viewers for joining this conversation. We know you are busy and have a full plate, so thank you for spending some time here on Destination University.
Anytime.
Thank you to everyone out there. If you haven't been to the website, Dr. Cynthia Colon, I have 3 choices of gifts for you just to thank you for your time. There's 3 options. You can choose one depending on the age of your teen. You'll find the appropriate one just for you. And I want you all to just consider sharing this episode with 3 people in the next 30 minutes. If this episode has in any way fueled your confidence or helped build your own dreams, share this with someone else who you know needs to hear Carlos's story. And if you're feeling extra loving, please write us a review because it sure does help other people find us as well. You can also join in the conversation on our Facebook group, Destination University, YO University. It's open to all parents, no matter your grade level. So that's all I have for you today, my dreamers. Remember to follow us, and we'll have a new episode, same time, same place next week. In the meantime, have a happy and sunny day. Wave, Carlos. Bye, everyone. I'm wearing Chapman. I'm wearing the shirt.
Let's go, Chapman.
Chapman. Go Jaguars. Jaguars, right? Did I have that right?
Panthers.
Oh, Panthers. 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 All right.